Hello, and welcome to Let Them Fly with me, Heather Harris. If you're a parent, you'll know that quiet worry, are my children on the right path? This podcast that gently reminds you to believe a little more in our children and their wonderful ability to surprise us, because no one is born great, and so few of us follow the path we first imagined. We hope to inspire you, reassure you, and give you the quiet confidence to trust a little more and just let your children fly. So today, it's my joy to welcome Harry Allen, who is Vice Principal for the Middle East at Minerva Virtual Academy, more often known as MVA. It's an award-winning British online school for ages between 11 to 18 and accredited by the UK Department for Education and now serves families across the Gulf. Harry's had more than 20 years in international education. So, welcome today.
Thank
I
you.
feel like you're an expert in this space, and we're going to be pulling a lot of information out from you as we go. Tell us to start with, what is online education?
Okay. Well, online education is difficult to distinguish from any form of education, really. It takes place in a virtual classroom rather than a real one. I think what's happened as technology has improved, and we've been allowed to explore different ways to interact in education space. We've realised that all children going to a massive concrete box at the same time of every morning and then coming out every day, having been told where to go every 45 minutes, isn't the only model available to us. I think things sort of came to a head a little bit with COVID, if people remember those days where, difficult though those times were for many families. It was also a time when some children started to realize that they actually felt a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more confident, that they were at home, they had some control over their learning space, they could have some sort of autonomy on their timetable. They didn't have to put their hand up if they wanted to go to the toilet, all this sort of thing. So online schooling, I think, is possibly the next step as we're looking at models of education and how we can engage young people. And it's now a very serious alternative to traditional bricks and mortar schooling.
I think COVID changed education for everyone. You're absolutely right. And I think while it took us a while during COVID to really get online learning right, I think it did become this real possibility. And a lot of children really thrived, although a lot of children didn't thrive in it. A lot of
Mm,
children really thrived in that
mm.
freedom to do their thing at their own time and at their own pace.
Absolutely. And I think, the other thing about it, and particularly the MVA model, where we operate something called flipped learning. And whenever all my years in bricks and mortar schools, this was really a bit of a buzzword that we should be operating flipped learning. We should be allowing students to take control of their own learning, take responsibility for their own learning. And in bricks and mortar schools, that can actually be surprisingly difficult to do. For people who aren't familiar, flipped learning is when students do some learning on their own and bring that learning to a classroom where it's consolidated and built on, and they might have some sort of task to do afterwards that then further consolidates it and takes it in different directions. What the MVA model and other online models do is it allows students to work at their own pace for a period of time through some guided learning. They then go into the classroom having already explored the topic, having thought, okay, I know a little bit about this. We're studying algebra today, whatever it may be. I've had an opportunity to have a look. I've already got some questions for the teacher. I'm a little bit unsure about this. This made sense. This didn't. And all these young people are then coming in with inquiring, questioning minds. Hopefully having been excited about the topic, so they're looking forward to going into the classroom in order to be able to continue that. And they look forward then afterwards to that consolidation, that post-live lesson work that we do. So all students at MVA, what they'll do is we have this wonderful platform called Canvas, which is our independent guided learning platform. And students will go through specific tasks that have been set for them. There might be something to share with the rest of the class online. And then they're going into their classroom. And then after the classroom, that's when they can consolidate and build on the work that they've done before. The key thing is, with the pre-live lesson work and the post-live lesson work, they can choose when to do it. And this is one of the great things about this sort of flexible online model that MVA offers. If they'd like to do their maths at 10 o'clock in the morning in preparation for a live lesson at 12, fantastic. If they prefer to do it at 8, wonderful. Okay, if they prefer to do it on Sunday afternoon, that's fine with us too. The only things that are fixed on the timetable are those live lessons. So what we're able to do is give young people genuine responsibility for their learning, not only what they're learning and doing it independently, with guidance obviously, but saying, I learned better at this this point. I'm going to have my lunch break at 10. I don't like eating lunch at 12 or 2 in the afternoon, whenever it may be. And when you give young people that sort of autonomy, when they say, you can have control over your learning space, over large proportions of your timetable, they start to get excited about it because it's theirs and it belongs to them. It does require students, and a lot of students come to us, they have to learn some independent learning skills quite quickly, but they have the support to do that. Every child at MVA gets a one-to-one mentor. They're going to meet with them every single week. The parents get a report every week. So, if any support that's needed, any challenges that a student's encountering is picked up very, very quickly by the mentor, and then that's communicated to the other teachers. So, so that seems like quite a long answer. Let's sort of go back to the beginning. What we're doing is we're enabling that real flip learning, that authentic sense of students taking responsibility for their learning.
And I love that because it's taking responsibility within a boundary, which is just so important. There are hundreds of online schools, thousands of online schools around the world. Tell me why MVA is different.
I think MVA is different because we do operate that authentic flip model. That's one of the first things. A lot of online schools are either completely independent learning, where you're just working through a computer screen, really, or they are pretty much a regular school timetable picked up and put online when you're going into live lessons constantly. Some of them can be very large. You might have sort of 100 people, almost lecture style in the lessons, but we don't do that. We split it very carefully between independent learning on campus and going into live lessons. I think that's really important. Our mentoring program, I think, is unique. I haven't come across another school that offers it, where every single student has their own mentor. They meet with them for at least half an hour every week. The mentor will go through everything about their life at school. How well are they doing with their independent learning? Are they able to keep up? How are the live lessons going? Are they confident? Are they relaxed, happy? Are they feeling able to navigate the systems? And one of the most important things, of course, is, are they happy? Are they actually enjoying their experience? So how's their well-being? Are they able to make friends? Are they socializing? The next thing I think is our community. We are a genuine community. We get together when we can. Just last week, actually, we had the students together. We went to Topgolf. Everyone here in the UAE went to Topgolf and had a wonderful morning. Parents came along having coffee, people playing golf, and it was just lovely. It was just a wonderful opportunity to get the community together. So that's very important too. And that community, doesn't stop if we're not able to offer live experiences or in-person experiences, I should say. We have dedicated social rooms every week for year levels. So year sevens can all get together. It doesn't matter where they are in the world. They can join a social room. They can play games, have quizzes. Just get to know people. Quite often they realise that the person they've just clicked with lives sort of a couple of streets down the road. So then they can start to meet up in person as well. So those, I think, are the sort of standout things for MVA, and why I think it's grown so quickly. I mean, it started 5 years ago. Our founder and CEO Hugh Viney kicked it off. I think he had 10 students.
Wow.
5 years later, we've passed the 2,000 mark, and I think that's because of those elements that I've explained, and also because more and more families and more parents are looking for a genuine alternative. So yeah, I think those are the things that make MVA stand out.
I think the community is very, very important, because I think one of the problems with homeschooling is it's quite lonely.
Yeah, it can be. And I think, homeschooling is one thing. I think you need to make a distinction.
Online learning, sorry.
No, it's quite all right. I think it's an important distinction to make. Because I think a lot of parents, when they think about online learning, they don't necessarily disassociate it from home learning. Home learning is quite often when the parents or a tutor are the teacher, and they're sitting down during the day, and they've got a curriculum to follow, some textbooks to follow, whatever it may be, and they go through it. Online learning in virtual school is taking the best bits of a traditional school and putting it online. So, the parents aren't doing any of the teaching. The students are, as I said, taking a lot of responsibility for that, but they're joining their live lessons with their teachers, with their classmates, in exactly the same way you would in a bricks and mortar school, except instead of a virtual classroom environment instead of a physical one.
So I know online homeschool, it doesn't really matter, but sort of the non-concrete box learning, it really worries parents. What's the honest truth about the success of children coming out of that model that's not a concrete box?
Yeah. And I think that's a really important point for a lot of reasons about, that families are a little bit nervous about, online learning. And I think for some years, it was seen as a little bit of a last resort for some students. That if you went to an online school, it's because you hadn't managed to fit in at a bricks and mortar school, or and this sort of stuff. And we'll pick up on that a little bit more later, I think. But I think a really good statistic is that last year with our sixth form, 85% of our A-level students got their first choice of university.
It's amazing.
They all went to university, those that had applied, but an 85% first choice is a good result by any means. Some of the more well-known schools will be very proud of that. So there's nothing to stop a student from achieving very well in a virtual environment. And a lot of students who come to us, because they haven't found that the traditional model works for them, have actually seen their grades go up. And certainly their well-being has gone through the roof. And if you're happy and you're content and you're confident, you're going to do better. And it doesn't matter if you're at school or at work or wherever. There's so much research to show that we do better when we're happy. Mm-hmm. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, MVA had the highest maths IGCSE score in the world. Wow. I mean, not just for online schools, but for any student. I mean, to be clear, she was an exceptional student. There's no question. She would have done well probably wherever she was. But certainly being at MVA was no barrier to her talents whatsoever. So, if one of the things holding families back from considering it is, will my student, be able to get good academic results? And of course, absolutely.
Yeah. And when we talk about students, is there a student profile particularly that MVA actually suits?
We're seeing it broaden and broaden and broaden. There were initially there are sort of a few categories, I suppose we see. One of them is our athletes, and we have quite a few elite athletes who join us. So on the tennis tour, the golf tour, the karting tour, because they need that flexibility. They can't go to a school, 7 o'clock in the morning to 4 o'clock in the afternoon because they have training and this sort of stuff. So that's a big appeal to them. So they can go off, and it doesn't really matter where they are in the world. If they've got a karting competition in Hungary, no problem. They can take their school and their laptop and off they go and do it. We have quite a large proportion of students who are neurodiverse come to us, who find a physical school just overwhelming. It's just there's too much noise, it's too much stress. They like to move around when perhaps that might, the teacher might find that's distracting, and constantly being told to sit down and all that sort of stuff. So they come to us and they can really flourish. We also see students who come to us who have been very unhappy at school for different reasons. Bullying is a problem in any school. We have to acknowledge that. And some students who haven't been able to find a way through that come to us and realize that, they finally found a safe space. But more and more, we're just getting families who want school to fit a little bit more around their schedule rather than vice versa. That not just the student, but the families want that sort of flexibility. That they want to be able to travel when they want to travel. That it shouldn't really matter if the holidays are on. If there's an important family event, they can go to it because their children have taken their school with them. And just a number of families now just questioning that traditional model, just saying, well, hang on a minute. We've been told this is the best way for children to be educated since the Victorian times, and yet no one's done anything else. No one's really tried anything else. Are we sure? And before I say anything else, to be clear that there are some very good schools out there, and a lot of students do very well, and they stay from kindergarten all the way through, and they love it and wonderful. But for those students who don't have such a great time, and they might not be particularly unhappy, they might not, their grades might be okay, but they might not be fulfilling their potential in that model, and sometimes think, well, I'd like to try something else and see if I can do better there. And I think that's really the market that we're filling now for those families who think, well, hang on a minute, is there something else? Is there a genuine alternative to a traditional school? And we're saying, yes, there is. Come and try. And we're finding that more and more families are doing that. And when they do come over and they do try, they tend to stay.
Yeah. So you were in mainstream school for 20 years?
Yeah, a long time.
It must have been a really hard decision, or was it a hard decision to move to online school?
I can sympathise. We talk about sort of parents being a little bit nervous about it. I can sort of empathise with that because I was a bit nervous about it as well. Am I going to be okay? And loneliness came into it. I'm going to be sitting at home. I'm used to sort of 500 kids, walking past the office every 45 minutes. Is this environment going to be for me? But I knew I wanted something different. I said I'd worked in the traditional school system for a long time, and I thought, this was an opportunity to genuinely do something new, genuinely do something different, genuinely do something exciting. And I'll never regret it. It was wonderful. And at times it was a little odd. Just being at home, it was a little quiet. I had to put the radio on a lot. But then I learned to interact using in the online world. All my meetings are online. I do get out of the office quite a lot. Here I am with you chatting away, and our students get out of their homes and their learning spaces quite a lot. So it's been a genuine I'm very, very glad I took. It did feel like a little bit of a risk at the time, and
Mhm.
I'm very, very glad I took that risk because I haven't looked back,
Yeah.
and it's been absolutely worth it for me. Both personally, I think my stress levels have come down considerably. My well-being's gone up. I'm really enjoying work again. Really enjoying being part of something genuinely new and genuinely innovative. So definitely the right thing for me.
Was there something, so you must have had some very perceived ideas, like all of us do, about online learning. Was there anything that particularly surprised you that sort of popped those perceived ideas once you started?
How much of a real community it was, that it wasn't just me and a computer. It was me and 2,000 students and x number of colleagues. It was just a different way of interacting with them, that I was very much part of a of a vibrant learning community. Just I happen to be here in Dubai, and hundreds of them in the UK and 50 other countries around the world, and all the rest of it. But everything that a good school does was there, and it was lovely to see so many students, happy and engaged. And we don't really have behavior issues at MVA. Very, very few. You always get some student who's a bit cheeky in the chat or something, but it's very easily dealt with. We don't have those sorts of bullying issues that so many
Mm.
students suffer from. So it was a surprise that A, it was such a great community, and B, um, what a healthy community it was. How good this was for so many people to be part of.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's one of those things that it's anything that's new is always, we're always very suspicious of it, aren't
Yeah.
we? It takes a while to become the norm, and I think online schooling is starting to become the norm. And you don't have an opinion about it like we used to have.
I think that's true. As I said, I think that more and more parents are realizing that this is a viable alternative, that it is absolutely something worth exploring. That it's not just for students who have got into trouble at school, or have failed, haven't failed their exams and had to go to an online crammer or a tutor or anything like that. That this is as I said, a healthy and perfectly respectable way
Mm.
to engage with learning. And I mean, it was a wonderful example when I was quite new to MVA. And we had a display at the guest convention here, and a couple of our students came down. We had a karting simulator, and a couple of our athlete karters came down and were driving away. And then one of them was demonstrating it to a family who'd come by, and they were chatting away, and said, "Oh, hang on a minute, sorry, I've got a physics lesson." And off he jumped out there, plugged in his computer, and went on to his physics lessons right there. And so that's that sort of flexibility. And people walking by were thinking, "Wow, that's amazing!
Mhm.
Isn't that wonderful that he's able to do that?" And that, I think, is just playing into so much about the perception of online
Yeah.
learning, that it's not a last resort. It's actually a wonderful resort for a lot of people, that gives the sort of flexibility and autonomy that bricks and mortar schools, are certainly the ones that I've been involved with, just haven't been able to offer.
So you've got this really unique perspective of both, and obviously long time in bricks and mortar, newer into online learning. For a parent whose child doesn't appear to be fitting in the school they're
Mm.
in, and that could be bricks and mortar or online.
Mm.
This is just your general sort of education knowledge.
Mm.
What advice would you give to that parent?
Yeah, just have a chat. I mean, really, just have a really open-minded chat about why that might be. So, if, for example, a student is in an online school, for example, and doesn't seem to be engaging well, and so on and so forth, just take them to one side and say, just talk to me. Well, what's wrong? It might be, well, I'm finding it a little bit isolated. I'm missing my basketball team, whatever it may be. And likewise with a bricks and mortar school, be open-minded where the student says, I'm just not very happy there. I just find it a bit difficult. It's noisy, it's loud, it's someone's telling me where to go every 45 minutes. I have to put my hand up to go to the bathroom. I'm just struggling with it. And they might not even be able to articulate that very
Mm.
well. But if you start to chat to them about it, well, is it this, or might it be that, and start to explore different things, and perhaps, put on the table, oh, have you heard of this school? I've heard this about that, and have let them digest whatever information you have, and then have a conversation about it. There's no school and no system that is right for every student, and that's really important to understand. And I think as parents, sometimes we assume that because the traditional models have been there for so long, they must be the right ones. And as I said earlier, for a lot of students they are, but for increasing number, they're not. So if your child is coming home unhappy or unfulfilled, or just doesn't seem to be sort of making the sort of progress that perhaps they made when they were younger, then just have that conversation. How is school? How is your day-to-day experience? What's it like? How do you feel when you come out of school? What is it you want to do as soon as the bell goes? Do you want to just leg it, or do you want to hang out and play some
Yeah.
sports? And from that conversation, you're going to start to better understand the sort of environment that they might thrive in. And fortunately now, parents, we have genuine choices. We do have genuine choices for parents
Yeah.
to make and families to make.
And good choice. I mean, I keep emphasizing good
Good
choices.
choices, yeah, very good choices.
So, I mean, one of the questions that we do get a lot, and we've touched on it very briefly, is about from coming from an online school into university. And obviously,
Yeah.
that's the biggest concern for parents, that
Mm.
where the education stops. Now, one of the things I would tend to say to parents these days is that universities are looking much more at super curricular. And
Mm.
within an online school situation, you've got far more time to do super
Mm.
curricular.
Very much so, yeah, and that's a very good point. And a lot of universities, I think in the US, it's always been that way. When you apply to the US universities and you have to write essays, they look at absolutely every aspect of your academic or your life at school, I should say. And I think a lot more models around the world are following that. And yes, when you have flexibility, you can do that. We have 50 or 60 online clubs that the students can join. But if, for example, you want to volunteer with the Dubai Autism Centre, for example, as one of our students does, but they've only got a slot at 10 o'clock on a Thursday morning, with MVA, you can go along and do that because that's absolutely fine. And you can move whatever, learning you had planned to do then to another time. A lot of our students love the fact that they can, one of my mentees actually is a very impressive horse rider and equestrian. And she particularly at this time of year, there's limited windows for her to be able to go and train and go and ride her horses because of the heat. But as her season changes, she can change her timetable. So the opportunities for young people to be able to engage with things that are really going to impress universities just open up way beyond the standard ECAs at a school or the standard sort of sports clubs at a school. All the stuff that you are blocked from doing because you're at school from 7 o'clock till 4 o'clock, that's suddenly available to you.
And no school run.
And no school run, and it's not a bad consideration. I mean, if it's a stressful time, and you're starting the day in a traffic jam. No one's particularly happy when they're arriving because you've rushed out of home. We all want to see slightly less cars on the road for all sorts of reasons. So yeah, don't dismiss that. It's important, and as Dubai grows in particular, the schools are all very big. The queues outside them, both at drop off and at pickup, are huge. If that's on your mind, don't dismiss it as not being a valid reason to look at good choices.
Yeah. So thank you so much,
Pleasure.
Harry. And obviously, MVA is new in this region, but growing at a rate of knots from what I can see and what I hear. We're only hearing good things about you. So keep doing the best work that you're doing. I have just one final question that I ask everyone. It's a bit of a curved ball.
Okay.
Knowing everything you know today, what one piece of advice would you give to your 7-year-old self?
7-year-old self. Wow, that's a very specific age. I'm trying to think what I was like when I was 7. Getting into trouble, I think. I think just be yourself. Yeah, just absolutely. I mean, what that means to a 7-year-old, I'm not sure, but I think that's the most important advice anyone can give a younger self is, follow yourself, your own ideas, your own dreams. Don't be pressured into being something that you're not. If you're unhappy, tell someone. Just say, I'm not getting on with this. This isn't working for me, and just tell them. So yeah, just be yourself.
Thank you so much. Absolute pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks.